Hi, my name's Stephan Kesting, and I run grapplearts.com. I've been doing martial arts since about 1981. I've been doing jiu-jitsu since the early 90s. I got my black belt in 2006. I've been training a long time, but I'm also, by training, a biologist, and I'm currently working as a firefighter. I'm a captain, and I specialize in hazmat. So this has put me at this weird confluence of jiu-jitsu and COVID and kind of the response to COVID. And by some act of God, I've ended up being one of the people preaching caution on this topic. I think it's real, but at the same time, it absolutely sucks. I've been training a long time. I love training. I want to train it. I'm sure you do too. What I want to talk about today is this idea of a training pod. And a lot of people have been asking me about it, and it's a good question. So very, very quickly, a training pod is when you get a small, very small number of people who train exclusively with each other. I'm going to talk a little bit about the why, the who, the where, the when, the what of the idea of a training pod. Why don't we start with why? Why would you want to limit your training size? So it's undeniable that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, incredibly unfortunately, is one of the very best ways to spread coronavirus. If you take a look at the super spreader events that have happened, typically they've been when people have been in close contact indoors. So close physical proximity, indoors, not wearing masks for an extended period of time with heavy breathing. That could mean singing, that could mean yelling, or that could mean doing jiu-jitsu. Because the heavier you breathe, you produce way more aerosols. You produce way more particulate particles, little tiny, tiny drops of water. Just like if you go outside on a cold day in the winter and you breathe out, you see that white cloud form? Those are all aerosols. You breathe out way more of those. So in jiu-jitsu, you're typically not wearing a mask. You're indoors. You're in close quarters. You're fighting as hard as you can. Man, it's the perfect recipe for coronavirus transmission. And if you take a look at super spreader events, they've typically happened in spin classes, not in yoga or Pilates classes. They've happened in kendo classes, not, with people just suntanning out at the beach. They've happened indoors when people have been together for a long period of time, a birthday party where people are loud and they're indoors and there's crappy ventilation. So we have to take major precautions if we're going to do any kind of jiu-jitsu. So this idea of a training pod came out of a conversation that I had with Dr. Chris Moriarty. And I put his recommendations for opening up jiu-jitsu at grapplearts.com/openingupbjj. And I'm going to go with those. He based the guidelines for reopening jiu-jitsu in a phased approach on the original CDC guidelines, the Center for Disease Control guidelines for reopening states. Now that became super political, super fast, and I'm not going to address the politics, but I still think that those are reasonable guidelines. So how can you limit your own danger? And more importantly, how can you limit the danger that you present to others, your training partner, and the people that you're going to come in contact with, directly and indirectly? You might be 20 years old. You might be super in shape, and the odds of you getting sick and dying from coronavirus are fairly small. Yeah, you might have heart problems for a while. Yeah, it might screw up your lung capacity, but you're probably going to survive. So what's the problem with saying, yes, I, Stephan Kesting, accept this risk of training. I'm willing to die for my sport. Now, I'm not anti-risk. I take risks all the time. I'm a firefighter. I do long canoe trips. I've trained martial arts for 40 years. I've done other dangerous things, but most of the time, that risk comes back just on me. If I, decide to do a solo trip in the Arctic and a polar bear eats me, really, yeah, it'll be sad for my family, but I'm not putting my family at risk. I'm not taking a 2-year-old out there to camp on the Hudson Bay lowlands to be eaten by a polar bear. I'm taking that risk for myself. Unfortunately, in a pandemic situation, you extend that risk to everyone. If I'm willing to train and to get sick, then maybe I'm going to infect my immunocompromised training partner, my diabetic training partner, my older training partner, my fat and obese training partner. You can say, sure, those guys should be willing to take the risk too, but what about the people that you all get in contact with? What about the little old lady in the grocery store that you give it to? What about the dude that you sit beside on the bus? What about the guy that you work beside in the office who gets sick? But while he's pre-symptomatic, he kills his grandmother, right? So you can't just think about risk for yourself. You have to think about risk for other people. So the whole point here is to minimize the amount of risk. For sure, you can make this argument about other illnesses too, like the cold and the flu. Well, people die of the flu, Stephan. People even die of the cold. Why don't you take all these precautions then? Well, obviously, it's the degree of danger that's involved. If you're driving a car, you're stone cold sober, you're not texting, if things go poorly enough, you can still kill someone. But the odds of that are low. Whereas if you're driving a car and you're drunk, you're 3 times the legal limit, and now you're trying to text, the odds of killing somebody else go up exponentially. So that's why I believe that we should be taking this thing seriously. Study after study after study from countries across the world that are basically insulated from US politics are coming up with very significant infection fatality rates. And given that, I think we have to take it seriously. Now, you may still disagree with me, and that's cool. Tell you what though, if you consider yourself the kind of person whose mind can be changed by data, by actual data, please get in touch with me. Instagram is one good way, or you can email me through Grapple Arts, and I will, to the best of my ability, try and get back to you and share the scientific data, the actual studies, the actual journal publications, the actual preprints that I'm relying on to assess that this is a real thing, and I'll share it with you. So get in touch with me if you're on the fence about whether this thing is real, and if you're actually willing to look at data and not just coming at this from a purely ideological perspective, because then I really can't help you. I do believe we're going to get through to the other side of this fairly soon. You throw 1 million scientists against the problem, you're usually going to come up with a solution. I mean, this is the Manhattan Project times 1,000, right? The smartest people in the world are working on this. There are tons of promising vaccine, phase 3 studies, phase 3 trials going on right now. There's also a ton of work on cures, right? Like a vaccine prevents you from getting it. A vaccine stops it from being as bad if you do get it. But what if there was a pill? Oh, we've got coronavirus. That sucks. Here, take 2 of these. Call me in the morning. What if that existed? Then all this would go away, and all these precautions I'm talking about would vanish. And wouldn't that be nice? And I do believe that something like that is coming soon. So, how big should your training pod be? I'm going to say as small as possible. You want a group of people to be small. This limits the damage. If one of you comes in and is pre-symptomatic but infectious, he's only going to infect 1 person or 2 people, as opposed to going to a regular jiu-jitsu class or even a regular martial arts class and infecting 20 people. I'm going to turn it on its head for a minute. Let's say we were going to create training pods of 20 people. Dude, I'm only going to train with you 20 guys if you 20 guys only train with me. First of all, the more people we include in our training pod, the number of connections between those people, the number of potential routes of infection multiply exponentially. If there are 2 people in our pod, there's really only 2 vectors. I can infect you, you can infect me. So that's 2 ways to infect that the infection can travel. If we have 3 people, well, now that's 6, right? I can infect person A can infect me, I can infect person B can infect me, person B can infect person A can infect person B. So that's 6. We've added 1 more person, but we've tripled the number of connections. Each additional person we add, the number of connections between those people increases exponentially. Also, you got to think of this. Who's going to be willing to join a training group of 20 people, a training pod of 20 people? Probably not the guy who takes it seriously. Probably not the guy who's wearing a mask when he goes into a grocery store. Probably not the guy who's going, you know what? I'm going to stay away from that birthday party if it's not outdoors and there isn't decent separation. Probably not the guy who's going to go, you know what? Let's open all the windows in my workplace and just keep the air moving through. It's probably going to be some yahoo who doesn't take this seriously is going to join a larger training pod. So the odds of kind of catastrophic damage or catastrophic spread increase. And also you're going to start attracting other people. So obviously the safest training pod is 2 people. You and me and you. And we're going to agree that we're going to be monogamous about this. I'm not going to train with you and then I'm going to sneak off and train with somebody else. So it's monogamous in that sense. And it's also under the assumption that we're going to take reasonable precautions. Yeah, I promise I'm going to wear a mask when I go into a store. In fact, I got some N95s to protect me when it's really bad. Oh, you got the same thing? Cool. We're going to promise that we're going to keep our social circles small. So I can see an argument for going to a training pod of 3 people. I think beyond 3, man, it just begins to get out of control. Now you got to keep track of 4 different people and what are they all doing on the side. Now, this is a little bit different from the training pod concepts a lot of schools are implementing. I'm talking about this from the point of view of the practitioner. If I was training with people, and I am, it's going to be in a really, really small group. Obviously, schools, that's not in their best interest. So they're creating larger training pods, and that's better than nothing, I suppose. And some of them are saying, okay, if you're in group 1, you're going to train Tuesday and Thursday and Saturday. If you're in group 2, you're going to train Monday and Wednesday and Friday. Or you're going to train in the mornings, and then this other group will train in the afternoons, and the morning group can't go to the afternoon. And we're going to track it, and we're going to figure out if somebody gets sick in a group, who have they been in contact with? That would be the responsible way to do large groups. I don't generally think that that's happening. I'm hearing lots and lots of anecdotal stories coming to me from people who don't want to be named of teachers just covering it up. Somebody got sick, they say, okay, you can't come in, and they don't tell anybody, and they keep it on the down low, and I think that's really irresponsible. I understand why they're doing it, but I don't make it right. So that's a little bit about who. Who would you train with? Who are you going to form a one-on-one or one-on-two training group and be monogamous until this damn thing goes away, until there's a vaccine, until there's a cure. Pick people who you think are going to be safe in the rest of their lives. Pick people who you think are going to be honest, that if they lost their sense of smell, if they're feeling crappy, if they've got some, any illness that they're going to tell you. They're not going to just come and train and then go, so sorry for making you sick and then your grandma died, but I just really wanted to train. So pick your people carefully. Let's talk about when a training pod is appropriate. There are lots of places where when coronavirus is exploding, I don't think it's safe to train with anybody. If you're in Miami right now, it could be different 2 weeks from now, but right now, if you're in Miami, I don't think you should be training. I think you should be taking a break. Should be, if you want to keep on working on your jiu-jitsu, work on your conditioning, work on your strength, work on your rehab, work on your flexibility, work on your mind by studying tape. But given how incredibly prevalent it is right there, how many cases are active right now, I don't think that that's ethical. I don't think it's safe for you, but I also don't think it's ethical because you're going to keep on spreading it. The guideline that Dr. Chris Moriarty used in opening up BJJ that I published are the amount of cases in your jurisdiction, in your area, in your greater metropolitan area, say, going up or down, and have they been going down for at least 2 weeks? Or if there's been a ton more testing, which isn't the case right now in most places, but if there is a ton more testing, has the percentage of positive tests gone down for 2 weeks, right? And you're being able to get this information now. You can read how, okay, in, Miami-Dade County, there were this many tests and this many positive things, and a month ago it was 10% and now it's 20%. So that means the percentage of people who are testing positive is going up. That is unlikely to be because there are more tests. So have the number of cases been going down for 2 weeks, and or has the percentage of positive cases been going down? Was it 15% 2 weeks ago, then 12%, then 10%, then 8%? That's heading in the right direction. Now, maybe, very cautiously, you can think about forming a one-on-one training relationship with somebody. And like I said, keeping it monogamous. Lastly, we can talk about where. Where are you actually going to do this training? If you train at a progressive school, you might be able to approach the school owner and say, look, I'm really worried about this. I've got an immunocompromised grandmother that I have to take care of, even if you don't. Do you mind, school owner, if Jimmy and I come in at 8 in the morning to train? We'll clean the mats before and we'll clean the mats after. A lot of school owners will say yes. A lot of school owners will try to accommodate that because they want to keep you as a student when all this is over. So you might be surprised that the level or the length to which people will go to accommodate you in doing this. Again, make sure that you clean the area. Most of the transmission is through aerosols, through respiratory droplets, but not all. Some of it is through touch, through fomites. So, cleaning the area before, cleaning the area after is still a good idea. Also, if you can, keep the doors and windows open, especially now in the summer. keep air moving through. I'm seeing in the literature and in the analyses much more emphasis being placed on ventilation. So if I breathe out a ton of small particles that are going to stay airborne for up to like 24 hours, it's much better if moving air carries this out. This is probably, in part, why there wasn't a massive spike in transmissions either during the various Black Lives Matter protests or the various Liberate the States protests, right? One were sort of center left and the other were center and right. One of them had more masks, the other had less masks, but there wasn't a huge spike of transmission in either of those cases. This isn't a political thing. Nobody knew this in advance. I didn't think either was a good idea. But by some act of God, it turned out that outside with a ton of air movement is way better than indoors with minimal air exchange. So we lucked out on that one. We as a society lucked out on that one. So if you keep the doors open, keep the windows open, keep the air moving through, you're probably going to be much better. You could also maybe train outdoors, right? It's summertime. I put an article on my website years ago. I think it's called The Cheapest or the Easiest BJJ Mat. It's basically talking about putting a tarp down on grass and staking out the four corners or the four corners and four midpoints. It actually works pretty well. I'll link to it here somewhere. That's a really good, cheap, expedient method of creating a mat. Or you can go buy a bunch of puzzle mats. Man, I've trained in like crappy basement apartments on 9 puzzle mats. You know, literally, you sweep the guy and you throw him into the kitchen cabinets, throw him into the stove. But it's all I had at the time, and it worked. So if you get 9, or better yet, 16 puzzle mats, you lay them down, indoors, outdoors, keep the doors open if you can, keep the windows open if you can. That's probably a good thing. Should you wear masks doing it? Probably wouldn't hurt, but it's probably not going to help a whole lot. The funny thing is, a lot of the people going, I'm never going to wear a mask. You're going to recycle your oxygen. You're going to lose oxygen. You're going to pass out. You're going to die. It's going to crash your immune system. They were the same people looking at the high altitude oxygen limitation masks to improve their cardio a year ago. So is a mask going to help? I don't know of any study that we can use to talk about combat sport at close range. Certainly there's a ton of data showing that masks help out in public, not partially to protect you, but mostly to protect the other guy from you. So you wear your mask to protect me, I wear my mask to protect you. There's a ton of data for that. When it comes to close quarters combat sports, I don't know of any data. If you know of any data, please let me know, because I'd love to have an intelligent opinion about this. If you want to do it, it probably wouldn't hurt. And I've heard of people doing it. I have not done that yet, but I would certainly be open to it. So that's the where. Just a quick plea to everyone in the sport. This will get back to normal. We will be training again normally sometime soon. Probably later this year, probably earlier next year. I mean, people in New Zealand are already fully back to normal in pretty much everything, because they not only flattened the curve, they didn't quash the curve, they eradicated the curve. Can that be done in North America? Probably not. So now the game is damage minimization, right? Don't flood the hospitals, because then your mortality rates start going up. Don't make this so widespread that it totally destroys the economy because of fear. And try not to kill yourself or your training partner or anyone you come in contact with before there's an effective treatment or an effective prevention, an effective vaccine. These things are coming. Nobody's hoping for it more than me. I've been doing jiu-jitsu a long time. I'm going to continue doing jiu-jitsu a long time. This is an unwanted interruption. It's really not a normal situation. To the people who are new in the sport, man, don't give up hope. If you've got to take some time off, but then come back. It's given me so much. It's given hundreds of thousands of people so much. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. People have said a lot of things they're going to regret. People have taken some very extreme viewpoints here and said some really dumb things that I think in a year's time they're going to have regretted saying. And it's a very, very stressful situation for everyone, especially school owners. Man, I feel for them. That's their livelihood. So cut people some slack. Keep yourself safe. Keep your loved ones safe. Keep your training partners safe. Try not to spread this to the little old lady in the grocery store, and we will get back to normal. All right, guys. Thank you for listening to this rather unstructured rant on training pods. I think it is a very reasonable solution, especially if they're kept super small, to get through this with some training. Is it perfect? No. Is something better than nothing? Always.